Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Philippe Lazzarini. He is the Commissioner General of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, known as UNRWA, and he joins us from Amman in Jordan. Thank you very much for being with us.
Good evening, and thank you for having me.
Mr. Lazzarini, your agency, which tends to some 5.8 million Palestinians, is facing its worst financial crisis in the midst of a pandemic, the COVID, of course. Since 2018, your largest donor, the United States, has cut funding. And lately, Gulf countries have also reduced drastically their contribution as they have gotten closer to Israel. So a very blunt question to begin with, is UNRWA on the brink of financial collapse?
The short answer is yes. UNRWA is on the edge of a financial collapse. 2020 has been an unprecedented year. As you indicated, we were struggling to get the financial resources at a time needs have significantly increased, partly due also to the COVID-19. In fact, the agency never really recovered from the US defunding in 2018 and built up its financial deficit to the extent that in November, December last year, I had to inform government staff and Palestinian refugees that UNRWA most likely will not be in a position to pay the salaries and hence impacting the delivery of our education services to more than 500,000 girls and boys in the region, but also all the health centers which are involved in the response of the COVID-19, and also to provide social safety net to those the most affected by the social economic stress here in the region.
How is 2021 looking? Because obviously the situation is still dire. Are you going to be able to survive financially 2021 if you barely did so at the very end of 2020?
Well, as you know, in 2021, there have been also some changes. We have in the United States a new administration, and we have heard a number of positive signs indicating that the readiness of the administration to resume assistance to the Palestinian, and through the assistance to the Palestinian, I'm expecting indeed that they will re-engage with UNRWA. And by re-engaging, it would be to resume a decades-long partnership with UNRWA here in the region.
Have you had direct indications from US officials that they would resume funding to UNRWA?
Well, there have been a number of public statements. The ambassador at the Security Council also indicated the resumption of the support to the Palestinian, and informally we received numbers of messages about the intention to resume directly assistance to UNRWA. For the time being, I don't know what the scope of this engagement will be, but as you know, at the time of the US defunding, the US contribution represented almost a quarter, if not more, of the overall core budget of the organization, and in total, their contribution amounted about $360 million.
So are you expecting the Biden administration to give UNRWA next year $360 million, or are your expectations not as high?
I do believe our expectations have to be realistic. What's important now is a re-engagement of the United States. Having said that, the financial difficulties the agencies is encountering would certainly advocate for a resumption at the same level than at the time the US decided to defund the organization.
Right. I want to get to the Gulf country. We've seen several of them, Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates, reach some agreement with Israel. And we've also seen in parallel, and it's probably linked because we know Israel is not a big fan of your agency, we've seen funding decrease. I mean, I'm just going to take the example of the United Arab Emirates. In 2019, they gave the agency $52 million. In 2020, $1 million. So obviously, this is a worrying trend. Are you calling on them to resume funding like they did in previous years?
I'm definitely calling on the Gulf country to be on board, to be a partner of UNRWA. As you indicated, in 2018, at the time of the US defunding, their collective contribution was about $200 million. It decreased in 2019 significantly and further decreased in 2020 to reach a total contribution of $38 million. So yes, our call today is to the Gulf country is remain a partner of UNRWA, invest in the human development and the dignity of the Palestinian refugees here in the region, and contribute through this investment also to the stability in the region.
Right. Do you think that this idea to defund UNRWA, and some reports that the UAE would agree with Israel that UNRWA needs to disappear, is part of their deal with Israel?
I think this is a question you should ask to the Gulf countries and to Abu Dhabi. The only thing I can say, and through the contact I do have, is that there is a willingness to continue to support the Palestinian refugees here in the region. And I do believe that UNRWA would be the best natural vehicle to provide this assistance.
Right. I alluded to the pandemic. Obviously, UNRWA is working in the West Bank, in Gaza, and in neighboring country. What is the sanitary situation in those areas?
Clearly, the Palestinian refugees have paid a high price when it comes to the sanitary impact of the pandemic. We have registered about 45,000 cases over the last few months. But beyond the sanitary impact, what this pandemic has also unleashed is a pandemic of abject poverty in the camp. And if you visit the camp today, in Lebanon, but in Syria, in the West Bank, in Gaza, what you will encounter is distress, despair, and also a sense of hopelessness.
Right. There is also an issue that was brought recently to the fore, the issue of vaccination. This concerns the West Bank and Gaza. Do you consider that Israel has an obligation to vaccinate people in those areas? Some are saying the Geneva Conventions, that's exactly what they say. And if so, one would imagine that UNRWA, because of its old history, because of its infrastructure, could play a role in a vaccination campaign for the Palestinians.
Yes, Israel has an obligation to ensure the access to vaccination for the Palestinians in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and in Gaza. Now, when it comes to the role of UNRWA, I also believe that you need one national system when you start to roll out a vaccination campaign. And UNRWA, because of its position, and especially in Gaza, stands indeed ready to support any rollout of a vaccination campaign. But for the time being, what is missing are the vaccine, and hence no rollout is currently taking place.
Right. As a conclusion, Mr. Lazzarini, I alluded to some Gulf countries hinting that UNRWA should disappear. Israel considers that UNRWA is indeed an agency that shouldn't exist. Do you consider that there's a chance that the agency could disappear because of a lack of financing and a lack of political support, maybe inside the UN as well?
No, I truly believe that the agency will continue its mandate, fulfill its obligation, provide education and health services to millions of Palestinian refugees in the region until the day there is a lasting and fair political solution. I do not believe that by ignoring the fate of the refugees who have never asked to be refugees 60 or 70 years later will be a contribution to a broader political solution here in the region. So I have faith that despite all the financial difficulties the organization is confronted with, that the organization will continue its human development mandate and promote the right of the Palestinian refugees until there is a political agreement in the region.
If UNRWA was to disappear, would you forecast a humanitarian and possible disaster beyond that?
Well, it would be a total disaster, and it would certainly trigger unrest and instability. But beyond that, much more misery in a region which is already hit by large-scale human tragedy.
Mr. Lazzarini, I want to thank you very much for appearing here on the France 24 interview from Amman in Jordan, and thank you for watching it.